Good morning. Welcome to this week's episode of the live show. I'm your host, Adam Quiney. We are here. I'm starting a little later today. I was going to start sooner, but then I didn't feel like it. And you know what's a good move is to just do what you feel. That's kind of nonsense advice, but today that's exactly what I did. I did not feel like starting at 10 o'clock. I felt like starting at 10:24. And so that's when we're starting. 24 is a pretty good number. Divisible by a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4. Go really high up. 6. Super divisible. Very good number. Big fan. I'm pro 24. I'm curious. This is the minutia part of the show. I am curious if you have any particular idiosyncrasies when it comes to things like numbers or how you walk or whatever. So I'll give you an example of one is when it comes to volume, my preference, and I push in this direction, is to have the volume either on a 10 or a 5. That's my preference. I'd rather have it on 20, 25, 30. But if I'm not going to have it there, then I would set it to an even number as opposed to odd. I like even more. So 22, 24, 26, 28. But ideally, I'm pushing to that 5 or I'm pushing to that 0. I like those 5s and 0s. They're pleasing to me. It's very pleasing to me. What idiosyncrasies do you bring to the table? I'm going to pour a little more tea as we get settled in here. We get ready to get started. I need to know your idiosyncrasies. I know we all have them. For some people, it's mathy. For other people, it's music. Particular ways that they move their hands. Particular ways that you sit. Is there a weird way that you sit in a restaurant or a particular approach that you have to a menu, and why? Why is that there? Let's see. What are we going to talk about today? There's 4 topics I've got listed here. We'll see if we get through each of them. We'll see how inspired I feel. One, we'll talk about the thing you're sure about isn't the problem and how that becomes the very problem that dictates everything that's available in your life past a certain point. I'm going to talk about insight as an escape hatch. Talk about the strategy of seeking competence. That's sort of like finding more information, researching, doing your work before you make a choice. You know, measure twice, cut once, that kind of thing. I'm going to talk about the trap of that. And number 4, I'll talk about the sort of people that can see everyone else's stuff, but not their own, and why that's the case. Or even everyone else's stuff and their own, and how that's still not actually the fix that they're hoping for. Anything up for me this week for me to share with you before we kick off? Anything I can distinguish? I'd have to say that it's been a the last couple of weeks, I think I shared this last week, have been fairly challenging for Bay and I. And this week, I think we're sort of in that, we've been in that state where you're like, okay, we've done a bunch of work to address what showed up. I'm not sharing it. I'm being a little bit vague here intentionally because it's not entirely mine to share and I want to honor everyone involved. And but nevertheless, like we did a bunch of work to sort of get on top of everything. And then in that state where your system is like, okay, are we gonna downshift here? Are we regulating? And the state, sometimes you can find yourself in where you're like, is it actually okay? Like, are we gonna get hit in the side of the head a third time? You know, how's this gonna all unfold? This past, what was it? I think Wednesday or Tuesday, I woke up, went to the gym, got home, and like grabbed something out of the fridge. And you know that experience where it's really interesting, like something's off, but it's not really in your conscious. You can't distinguish what it is. I had that experience as I went into my fridge. I'm like, what's going on? Something, and kind of step past it. And like, you know, for breakfast, typically it's the show where Adam talks about what he has for breakfast. I typically have skyr. I don't know how you pronounce that word. Skyr, which is the Icelandic yogurt, it's like protein paste almost. I like it's thick. So I scooped that out and, you know, had toast and then was sitting down and I'm like, there's something about this skyr that's weird. And it turns out the fridge had stopped working. So our fridge was sitting at 68 degrees Fahrenheit and it's meant to be at 38. So full 30, you know, above. It took me a while to figure that out. I was like, what is why does something about this feels less satisfying, less enjoyable? and uh and so excuse me, let's put myself, I guess someone's blowing my texts up. I'm gonna put myself into focus mode, do not disturb, for 1 hour. There we go. I shan't be disturbed. So anyhow, then we're like, okay, great. The fridge isn't working. What do we do? One more thing to manage. Fortunately, we just finished renovating our suite. So we have a fridge that's sitting there unused. We have a fridge that we are about to sell from that got replaced in the suite. So we had, we were pretty set up to be able to manage it, moved all the food across, had a guy come out. And as is always the case, the tech guy comes out and looks at the fridge and he's like, seems to be working pretty good. And the fridge has started to recalibrate. So we don't really know what's going on. Maybe there's a new fridge in our future. Come on, new fridge. Come on, more money to spend. We'll see. Who knows how that'll go. But it was one of those things that kind of resolved itself. Mysterious. Our appliances are getting old, so it's probably time to replace them. That experience that I just described of like, pulling out the yogurt, being in the fridge, being like, what's going on? What was happening in hindsight, looking back, I'm like, oh, I was the familiar feel of that yogurt was different. I'm used to the yogurt being 38 degrees Fahrenheit as I pull it out of the fridge, and my hands were met with a different experience. And that experience of like the chord, the note being just slightly sharp or flat, like in music, that's the experience that happens constantly in our interactions with people. That's the layer of work that I operate at, that my work operates at, and that really profound leadership needs to operate at. And we can all feel that something's off here. But what happens is, because no one is distinguishing it, because we don't have any metrics, because this is kind of poorly understood, we just sort of like go, I guess there's nothing to really conclude about this. I guess there's nothing here. Maybe I'm just, whatever. Maybe we dismiss it and then we go about our day. And then we continue to operate that way. Now with food, the nice thing is if there's like a really clean metric, because if things stay like that for long enough, you get sick and throw up. So you get pretty clear pretty quick. But with leadership, the getting sick and throwing up is that the company has a huge scandal, or you have a massive exodus, or your morale plummets, and then the leaders are left being like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know why this is going this way. Or the leader kills themselves or gets cancer, or, you name it, on and on and on and on. So ideally, we're trying to address this stuff before we get to that point. And that's why this work exists. That's the nature of this work. So that's what we're seeking to do here when we're looking at this stuff, when we're talking about these kind of things. Okay. So first of all, I want to talk about a really common roadblock. Like, I'm going to talk at a highly general level roadblock for why people can create change on the surface, but can't create long-lasting shifts. Change on the surface is sort of like, what's a good example? I am tired of being rejected by people. I'm going to become the one that does the rejecting. So now what's happening on the surface is I'm not going to people and saying, do you want to do stuff with me? And they say no. And I can't change that. I don't know what that's about. I'm just like, fuck people. Instead, the change is now I say, I'm not going to invite that person or that person or that person. I stop inviting people to stuff. So on the surface, it's like, wow, what a change. You've completely changed your life. You used to care so much about what people thought of you, and now you don't care at all. So that's the shift on the surface. But underneath that, what is continually sticking around is like there's a breakdown in connection in your life. And that's the thing that can't change. These two things on the surface look completely opposites. Like, what a change. You've gone from one end to the other, but you're still orbiting the same lack in your life. And that's how most change is for people at you. That's how much change is for you and for most of us, and pretty much all of us, really, is there's a yearning that we have in our life. There's a lack or a missing that we can't seem to create. And then we we have this sort of like an orbit around it. We never quite get into the center. We orbit, and we usually hang out at one antipode, one end of that orbit, and then our attempts to change, move us around to the other side. We still have the same lack. That change in the moment creates this early phase certainty bubble that we get, where we're like, I've changed things are different, everything's going to be different now. And at that point, you can't do much other than no one can really make a difference. And the state someone's in is like, I've finally done it. I've solved this. I feel so good. They ought to. But after enough time, they start to realize, oh, there's still that same lack. And if you circle around enough times, if you do enough orbits around this thing without actually being able to touch this, eventually you just resign yourself to the idea that this thing that you yearn for and wish for, it's impossible. You just need to learn to be okay not having it. And that's resignation. That's where a lot of people end up. And that's why people's lives, as they age, slowly contract and become smaller and smaller and smaller, because we give up on more and more and more things. So at a high level, the thing that I see time and time and time again is that most everyone have arranged their lives towards a certain direction, a thing they want, a way they want to show up. And in going in that direction, there's sort of like a certainty, like I would never be this way. This is absolutely not the thing, blah, 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 blah. So I've heard it lots of different ways. I've heard entrepreneurs when they're asked like, hey, your vision's really great, but what if you fail? And they say, there's absolutely no way I'm going to fail. I'm absolutely unwilling to even consider that possibility. Or I had someone long ago, like a decade ago, come to me and be like, I really love your content. I really like to work with you, Adam. Can we talk? And we talked. And at the end, they were like, so what would you suggest I look at? And I suggested that they look at the victimhood that they were bringing to the table. There was sort of I am so excited to start. I would love to do this, except for they're at the effect of, they're a victim to their circumstances. And their response was, no, absolutely, it's not that. I can't stand the thought of being a victim. I hate that. It makes me sick just to consider it. That's totally not what it is. So this thing that each of us is certain we would never be, that's the reason we're stuck. Because there's a unwillingness, an inability to consider that possibility. And as long as there's an inability to consider that possibility that we could be there, we can't do anything about it if it's true. So I'm going to elaborate this with a more specific example, but the example is about something specific. And what's important is to listen through the lens of where this might be alive for you. What is your version of this? So the easiest way to see this is, if you're based in the States, you can see it through the political lens, because that's a really easy place to see judgment and divisiveness in yourself. Same in Canada, really. Canadians tend to create divisiveness more geared towards the States rather than internally. The States provide like this easy, when you have Trump in power, it's easy to make that, but either way, we create us, them everywhere. So the idea is, if you want to get a hold of what this is specifically for you, you look at like, who are the people you really judge? So what is it about conservatives? What is it, or Republicans in the States? What is it about Democrats or libtards in the States? I'm embracing that term I feel like an aside. Am I allowed to take that? Can I appropriate that? Like, Black people have appropriated, that horrible word that was directed derisively at them. Can I appropriate libtard? Can I take that and make it my own and be like, yo, I'm being libtarded and it feels amazing. Can I revel in my libtardedness? Is that allowed? I don't know. Anyhow, so you look at someone that you despise, that you have a ton of judgment about, and you can filter through like, what is the quality here? What is it about this person that I just can't stand? And then consider as a starting point that that's the thing you're unwilling to consider you bring to the table. That's the thing you are unable to even open your mind to the possibility that that's the way you show up. The best thing you can do with this is not trying to like judo it, like not try to, okay, well, how could I? Or what I'm inviting you to consider without going any further steps down the road is that the thing you are judging someone, the people you despise the most, And if you say you don't judge people, then consider that you judge the people that are judgmental, because you got a block there. The thing you judge in others the most, all I'm inviting you to consider is consider that that represents a place where you are not open in terms of your own inquiry. You're not at that. Judgment creates a narrowing of your field of view. So the example here is, this might feel like a little left turn. I'm going to try to stick the landing, bring them back. I had this person I knew who had this game they'd created, well, it's a game. It was made of like woodcuts, and they had put symbols, like sort of borrowed sacred symbols from a variety of different cultures and whatever, like flower of life, which is all those circles together, other sacred geometry, et cetera, et cetera. And so the game was effectively like a set of tiles with duplicates of different symbols across. So every symbol had two tiles with that symbol on it. So it's basically memory, the game. I don't know if any of you remember this. I think all of us played as a kid. You array in the field, and then you turn one over, and you turn another over. Did you match? No. Okay, great. And then so what it does, it trains your memory, blah, blah, blah. And this person would speak about this thing. First of all, it was beautifully made. Like the wood cutting was nice. It was etched in. It looked really great. It had a nice bag for it, et cetera, et cetera. All fine and good. Without a doubt, the most attractive version of this memory game that I'd ever seen. But this person would speak about this with such like laudability, L-A-U-D, laudability, like this is going to transform the world. This is the most powerful thing for anyone's child to play with. This is all we need to do, and would bring it and put it down in any gathering, like a gathering of people that are practicing law, and like down comes this game, and hey, let's use this. It's really going to serve us. Fine, all fine and good, right? But the thing was that this person was completely closed to the idea that this thing could be anything other than the most powerful game that you could put in front of a child. This was the thing that was going to open children up and make a difference. And first, nicely done, Davin. Nicely done. Davin got first comment. He's winning. So the person had no capacity, no willingness to even consider for a moment that the game was not what he asserted it was. No, this is like the thing. This is going to make a difference. And because they were unwilling to turn towards that and consider that, like, the thing to consider was like, well, maybe this is just memory. Maybe this isn't that powerful. Because they were unwilling to turn towards that and face it, then what happens is their leadership gets put into a bit of an awkward position, because it's like, if they're right that this is the most powerful thing, then the conversation that they are in and the options they have from that conversation are, well, why isn't this getting picked up? Why isn't this selling like hotcakes? Well, maybe because I need different marketing. Maybe because people are closed to the thing that would blow their brains open. Maybe, this is getting very personal. I'm like, why isn't my coaching picking up? Ew, yikes. Let's change the subject. There's this conversation that you make when you are insistent on a fact, and that fact is beyond inquiry. However, if they could turn towards, hey, maybe this isn't actually all that I think it is, then they can open themselves up to an entirely different inquiry that is otherwise unavailable. Like, well, maybe this isn't as big a deal as I think it is. And so maybe the issue isn't like, why aren't I marketing this in the right way that's creating whatever? Maybe it's like, this is just never going to take off that much, because the market for games that are basically memory, no matter how nice, no matter how bougie, it's got a ceiling, and it's only going to get so far. Everything changes when you can turn towards that fact. There's another example I'm going to provide, and then we'll pull this apart a little bit more. The example is from, I think it was Canadian Dragon. Oh no, what did I just knock down? Oh, just a pen. It's no big deal, guys. We're all right. I'm going to see if I can find this. Dragon's Den Bullet Ball. Does anyone remember Bullet Ball? Pew, pew, pew. Here we go. Let me just get this copy link address. I'm going to get a stupid, incredibly long. Oh no, it's just Reddit. They put it in the cringe Reddit. That's never a good sign. So this guy had created Bullet Ball, and he came on Dragon's Den and he was like, I've created this game and it's going to revolutionize the world. And they were like, okay, tell us about it and blah, blah, blah. What's your situation? And the guy had been left by his partner, and he had, he was living in a van. He'd lost his home, and he had this game. And if you just even click this link, you can also search for Bullet Ball, because for whatever reason, I can't post comments in LinkedIn and Facebook. It only goes to YouTube. So apologies. But if you search for Bullet Ball, all one word, Dragon's Den, you'll see this. And the way this game worked was you have a circular table, any circular table. You sit there, and it's basically air hockey, but without the puck, without the air, and without the whatever those things are you hold, the playing pieces you use to whack the puck. So you just have balls that you hit with the back of your hand, and then you try to defend. And this guy he had that sort of tunnel vision, like this is going to be a success no matter what. And the conversations on Dragon's Den in terms of the interactions is really telling, because there's just an inability and an unwillingness to turn towards the idea that, like, hey man, this isn't actually that big of a thing. So this is, Seth Godin talks about this in his book, The Dip. The Dip is Seth's book about this idea that if you are moving, there's this sort of classic pattern as we're creating what's next, where you are going to hit the dip. And the dip is where it's the breakdown. It's where you've stopped doing what worked, or you've come up against the limit of what works. And there's this threshold that needs to be crossed. And as you seek to cross that threshold, there's going to be a dip. Things get worse. And the dip is where many people quit. And I heard Seth giving this really good interview years back about this, where he was saying, now here's the thing, is that there's plenty of people for which they're going to confuse the dip with they're going to think like, oh, I'm in the dip, I just need to push harder. And they're going to confuse the fact that they have an idea that doesn't have much merit, that required more market research, that's not going to pass muster. It's never going to be a success, but they confuse that for the dip. And then they just keep grinding and pushing and pushing and pushing. So there's some discernment. That's why coaches, leaders, that's why we have to open ourselves to the vulnerability of being supported by other people, because our ability to discern when we're on the ground is fairly poor. Let's have a bit of tea. So this is the general thing to look for, is that the thing we judge in other people, the thing we are unwilling to pause and to consider, that's the thing usually in our way. And we're predisposed to move away from it rather than to slow down and come into contact with it. So what people often do with that is they take that idea that I've just put on the table, and then they seek to gain more insight around it. Okay, got it. That makes sense what Adam said. How do I figure that out more? Maybe I'm gonna learn, okay, I despise condescension in people, so I'm gonna really blah, 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 blah. The move is not to learn about condescension. It's not to think about how you feel about it. It's not to go and brainstorm about it. The move is to slow down so much that you can actually sit in the feeling of being felt as the very thing you despise in other people. To slow down and actually come into contact with the visceral experience of being that which you would judge every single other person for. And until you can sit in that feeling, you can't move past it. You're forever holding it kind of like a beach ball. You're holding it under the water, and nothing shifts from that place. Your whole, everything you can create is a function of what you can create, provided you're holding that beach ball under the water. It doesn't work. Okay, so that's the thing you're sure isn't the problem. That's done. We're going to talk about, do we go to insight as the escape hatch or seeking competence here? I think I want to talk about this idea of they're kind of two sides of the same thing. So Devin's asking me what kind of tea is up in this mug, this Hope BC. This is my best mug in my house. That's an excellent shape of mug right there. And this tea is Paris at Night. Might pour a little bit more out of my teapot right here. Let's just top that up. Which is a Carney and Sons based tea. What fun. Okay. So, yeah, let's talk about seeking competence. First of all, the kind of people that this is applicable to are the sort of people that are really reliable to listen to a show like this or get feedback. They're often avidly seeking out feedback, and then as soon as they get the feedback, they're like really reliable to take it on and to metabolize it. They're really reliable to listen to a podcast or read a book, make notes, synthesize, take in the insight, got it. These are the sort of people that in a leadership conversation, it looks like they're doing everything right. They're everything in the 360 feedback review gets in somehow. Like most people bounce stuff out, resist stuff, make excuses. Oh, okay. They nod their head, but you can tell it's not really getting in. These are the people for which everything gets in immediately. And they're like, okay, got it. Okay, here's what I need to do. Oh, it turns out I'm talking about it. Insight as the escape hatch. So this is the fastest, smartest people in the room, the fastest, best. These are the people that are really good at reading leadership books, reading leadership manuals, having interviews with people, talking to them, pulling that insight, and then operationalizing it. They operationalize every single piece of insight very, very quick, which is an amazing skill and gets you to a certain point. But the trouble, the trap, is that like everything, this becomes the new strategy. So the strategy is the moment there's a piece of insight that reveals something you don't yet know, synthesize, metabolize, add it into your field of what you know, and then put it into action. And what that does is it allows you to keep moving at a very fast rate, kind of forward, but within a limited range. Think of it like a small piece of the pie, or if you want a wide piece of the pie, I don't really care, but it's a piece. There's an angle to it, a subset. And so the thing is that applying this insight means that they never have to sit with the feeling of being stuck or feeling like it just doesn't make sense or they're confused. The automatic reach for is, how do I put this into action? How do I? So, in coaching conversations, when I'm coaching people like this, these are the people that at first are like really palatable to my ego. They're really affirming because every conversation, they're like, wow, this is so great. I'm getting so much out of this. If I'm developing someone's leadership and every conversation, they're getting so much out of it, something's up. Something's wrong. Because for any of you, like if we used sports as an example, I don't know anyone that doesn't have a frustrating experience as they're trying to improve in a particular sport or particular field of art. There's parts where it's like, yeah, cool. That's so good. I learned that about my golf swing. I didn't understand that before. And now it makes sense. But there's other parts where you get the feedback and you're like, frig, I can't even see it. It doesn't make sense. This is annoying. And you just want to wing your golf club into the bushes. Anytime that's missing, I have to get curious. And so too does anyone whose leadership is always going that way, where it's always like, got it, got the next thing, feels good, move on. There is a aspect of life and leadership that is being stepped over. That's the only way that experience can be sustained, because it's not what is our natural state. The fantasy is lovely. I love that fantasy of like, yeah, you just do this and then everything's good. And then you operate at a 95% for the rest of your life. And you never have to feel sick. You never have to feel tired. You never have to feel let down. You never have to feel depressed. That all sounds lovely, but it's actually not how life goes. Because as you're doing that, people are going to die. People are going to get sick. People are going to feel sad. Some days you're going to wake up in a bad mood. So what's often happening here is that insight is being used to bypass. Whilst insight got them to this level of success, and that level of success is usually better than, it's this sort of level of success that a lot of people would yearn for or dream for or be envious of. But it doesn't matter. If this is a person that wants to get to the next level for themselves, that level of metabolizing insight becomes the issue, because metabolizing insight is the way that they don't have to come into contact with which they would otherwise wish to avoid. In this case, I would assert it would be something like feeling listless, feeling like you don't know what to do, feeling like there's just no path forward, feeling like nothing matters, actually sitting in that experience. And the way to sit in that experience is to free yourself from insight, to let go of trying to create insight around it. Really, the work in these moments is to witness the machinery that tries to create insight and then the next thing to do and then blah, 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 to witness that happening and to actively continue to set it down. One of my first teachers gave me this incredibly annoying metaphor. So I was like, okay, I'm this person I'm describing, of course. It's like, okay, got it. Okay, so this is how I'd listen to him. He'd be speaking up, hey, okay, yeah. So got it. I tend to stop listening to people. Oh, so how do I change that? And he's like, well, it's really easy. You notice when you're holding this pen, and then you set it down. And then a couple minutes later, you're going to be talking, and you're going to notice again that you have the pen in your hand, and the job is to set it back down. And then suddenly, before you notice, you're going to be making a gesture. You're going to be like, frig, the pen is back in my hand. That's the hard work. That's the rep at the gym. And people don't want that to be the rep, because we would rather, follow a list of do this, do that, and then my life improves, because that's additive. The hard work here is noticing the persistence and the ubiquity of the machinery that we've got in place that ensures that our life can create X, Y, and Z, but nothing outside of it. And so that's the work, is to sit in the whatever shows up when you want to reach for insight. And instead of reaching for, notice, oh, I'm trying to create insight from this, I'm going to set it down. And then to sit there and be like, fuck, this sucks. This feels uncomfortable. I don't feel like I'm moving forward. And then guess what's going to happen? You're going to go, wow, I can see how I don't move forward at all in many, like there's so many places where I'm actively working against this. And like, wow, this is actually teaching me a lot about how my child, you've got the pen back in your hand. You're creating insight now about the lack of insight. So the system, it reasserts itself over and over and over again. And the hard part of the work is to witness that time and time and time again. That's the untraining. That's the part people don't like. It's sort of like if you want to become really good at dribbling with both hands in basketball, but you spent your whole time, your whole life up to this point dribbling with the right, you need to practice with your left, but you also need to start to notice in games where you keep switching the ball over to your right hand. And then you got to stop doing that and hang out over here. It feels taxing in a weird way. It's taxing in like, if you go to the gym and you feel exhausted because, oh my God, how many metaphors am I going to bring into this? I don't know. Let's cram a few more. Going to the gym, doing arm curls, and then feeling your biceps really sore, that's sort of taxing in an intuitive way. That's a satisfying, intuitive way. Oh yeah, my biceps are sore because I worked. But if you go to the gym and then just sit there and notice your desire to lift weights and don't act on it, that's taxing in a different way, because you're actually choosing out of something that's taxing in a systemic and energetic and on some level, like often emotional and ontological way, a being-based way. And that is less satisfying, that kind of taxing. That's why people tend to, rather than transform, metabolize more insight, get more insight, become smarter, become faster, but stay operating inside their existing range. Boom, roasted, done. Camera, goofing around. Did you know? Fact time. Mid-episode fact time. Did you know? When I was working as a law student, one of the things that we did was we took a tour of our federal penitentiary. There's two. There's a penitentiary and then there's a prison, I think. I think that's the distinction we have. One of them is at the southernmost tip of the island I live on. And it's called William Head. And head as in the land is a head. You know, a piece of land that juts out. William Head is gorgeous. The land is incredible. I'm not totally sure how it got created, but the idea is this is kind of like a place where people are ready to start moving into population. I, for one, libtardically think that this is a fantastic idea, because I think if our aim in prison is more than just vindictiveness and punishment, if we are seeking to rehabilitate people, then we have to graduate them out of the world that is like a maximum security prison. You can't, now some people would argue, nah, screw them. Once they've made the thing, they've committed the crime, that's it, done. That's fine. That's your argument. This isn't, that's not mine. So anyhow, William Head, beautiful, really cool to see, fascinating. You'd see these sort of areas and the guards would tell us like, you could see if people were pro-social or anti-social based on like the fridge. Because the groups that were pro-social would have like a ketchup condiment and the anti-social ones would have like 5 because you just couldn't handle someone using up all your ketchup or whatever. Yes, boy, did I take a digression here. What I'm going to talk about is federal prison. What's it called? Wilkinson Road Jail, which is a jail. It's a very beautiful jail here, sort of near us on the island. Maximum security. And we did a tour of that, and the guards let us know, like, look, there's one thing you never ever, I mean, first of all, don't interact with the inmates. You're not really going to get a chance to, but should you? The one thing you are absolutely not to do is call them a goof. I was like, why would that be a thing? And the reason is because of the stigma in prison around mental health. And calling someone a goof, which I would think would be like silly, almost bordering on ridiculous. You call someone a goof, they're honor and duty bound to attack you and to hurt you. Otherwise, there's like this face that they've lost. And so that's the law of the prison. So now you know that. Now you know that about, I don't know if that's the same in the US prison system, but in the Canadian prison system, at least here where I live, do not call anyone a goof. So now you're equipped for that if you ever do a tour. Okay. All right. So we're going to flip the switch. I'm going to talk about personality types that seek competence and how that's all playing out, why that is an issue. So seeking competence is we're going to label that like a strategy that solves the problem of you might not be smart enough, you might look dumb, blah, 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 blah. So if we really draw this out, and I'm going to pick up my pen and I'm not going to put it down, I don't care. If we start over here on the left side of my screen, and we draw brilliance. So someone that starts as brilliance, part of what they bring into the space is brilliance. They use terms like libtarticle. Brilliance is the sort of quality that some people, all of us on some level, but some people have in strong suits. And it's the quality of fast twitch muscle fiber in your brain. It's the sort of quality of being for people that love, thoughtful problems, love solving puzzles, love strategic as well as tactical thinking, can move up and down through various layers of reasoning and thought. Brilliance is the quality that tends towards metabolizing insight very quickly because it's very good at understanding. And brilliance, the thing people with that quality often feel quite uncomfortable is the experience that they're stupid, or that people think they're stupid, or that they might even just seem stupid. And maybe not everyone, but certainly other people that are brilliant. I don't mind if this person over here thinks that I'm not brilliant, but that person over there who's really smart, I don't want them to feel that way about me. I want them to see me as, their intellectual equal and so on and so forth. If you have a hard time accepting this, you can just let me know and I will set you straight. This is a common problem. Just like the people that in the world are most generous, often the thing that they don't want to feel is that they might be perceived or seem selfish. So we kind of often fear that which is antithetical to who we are. That's across the board. So at some point, the bad news is we come on this planet and we have these beautiful qualities, and then we learn, because the world is just worlding around us, we learn to fear these experiences. Maybe our parents looked at us a certain way, or our peers or whatever. And so brilliance starts to fear this idea, this experience. I don't want to look dumb or incompetent or stupid. And we create a strategy, which is great. I'm going to figure out ways to avoid that issue, to make sure that that is not who I become. Which on the one level is kind of silly, because the last thing a really, really brilliant person needs to worry about is looking dumb. And it's the most that they worry about. Just like the last thing a really, really generous person needs to worry about is being selfish or being seen that way. And it's the biggest concern. Even if it's unconscious, it's the thing they manage around the most. So this idea of I might look stupid or not be smart enough or whatever, that becomes a need to prove and assert competency. So people like this get really good at figuring out the right answer before they open their mouth, waiting to hear everyone else's opinion before they offer theirs so that they can consider everything on the table before offering a very well-reasoned response. Becoming really good at arguing, becoming really good at, if there's someone contradicting them or saying, I don't think that's right, proving why it is, proving why what they've said is right, or finding a way to kind of like an escape hatch for that. And what happens is that the strategy by which these people's lives gets created is one that involves a great deal of seeking more competence. So when I have a decision in front of me and I'm not sure what the right answer is, based on everything I've just laid out, the move is, well, figure out, do more research, do more studying, do more exploration, learn more, find people that have more expertise than me and ask them, so that then I can develop inside of me the ability to have enough expertise, and then I can make the choice. And this works really well, like every other strategy, provided what I want to create in my life can be gotten through more competence, through learning more, through getting more information. Not only that, but the people I'm describing become better than anyone else at synthesizing information because they practice it so often. So like, you can put a big document in front of someone like me and we can move through it. I mean, these days, this is, you just hand it over to AI. But historically, one of the things every lawyer that I met was really good at was taking this huge thing and flipping through it and then being like, okay, here's the gist. Here's what we need to be alive to. Here's the fundamental issue around which this whole point turns. Off we go. So we become very good at synthesizing because we have to, in order to affect our solution to solve what we think is wrong about ourselves, or what might become visible or might become the truth in the moment, or would be the experience we'd otherwise avoid. All the same stuff. So we get to this point where we can synthesize information really, really, really good. The trap happens when we are put into either a position in life for which more information is not going to answer or solve it, or we start to want something in life for which more information is not going to create like a solution. And what's ultimately happening in these situations is that the way forward is going to require, on some level, being with the feeling that we might not be competent. And what gets created in those situations is, so now the person in question has this leadership moment in front of them, which is like, okay, there's a decision you have to make and you might make the wrong decision. And then unconsciously what that gets, the flow chart for that is, and if you make the wrong decision, you're a fucking dum-dum. And so what are you going to do? What's the decision? And based on the strategy we just talked about, the decision will be gather more information, figure out more information, synthesize more information. And that'll do a couple of things. For decisions that aren't time bound, like finding a romantic partner, like deciding where you want to take your, where and when and how you want to take your big trip around the world that's going to be a year off. You know, for stuff like that, what'll happen is that the strategy never resolves. It just becomes, well, get more information. Okay, I've learned a lot about England, but now I'm going to spend the next 3 weeks learning about Thailand. And learning about Thailand, I learned about Bhutan. Now I'm going to learn about, and so on and so forth. So in those situations, what happens is the strategy expands to fill an endless amount of space because there is never enough. It's not an informational problem. The result the person is trying to create is not one that can be collapsed down into a decision through more information. The only way to create the result is to take a swing, to make a decision, and to risk that experience of being incompetent. Put differently, to get at what they really want in these situations we're talking about, it requires traveling through the very thing they've constructed their whole life around avoiding. And that's a problem. So that's what happens when there's no time bound on it. Spend the rest of my life. Eventually they get to the point where this becomes like a neat vision, and maybe they're like, yeah, I just know a lot about countries and I love exploring them. And, you know, when I was young, I really wished that I could do a big trip, but at this point, I'm just satisfied with learning about them. That's how that morphs over time. That's resignation from an empowered place. When the decision is time bound, meaning there's a deadline, there's like a, hey, you actually have to make a decision. You have to make it within this amount of time. What happens tends to be panic, anxiety, overthinking, cortisol overload, et cetera, because the issue is that now you don't have the luxury of just continuing to do this forever until eventually it goes away. There are stakes on the table. There's a necessity to act, and still you cannot avoid, you can't make the decision through more information. More information is only ever going to add more complexity to the situation, which you then have to synthesize. And once you've synthesized it, you're going to realize I'm even further away from understanding and making the decision. And then there's even more and more and more. And so the challenge here is to set down the strategy. And the challenge when you set down a strategy is basically to be willing to make a decision, and then to be willing to sit in the feeling of incompetence in this particular example. Right? So this is that constructing our lives to avoid a particular experience. We're going one layer deeper into the specifics of it, is to actually allow ourselves to sit in and to feel the discomfort that comes from making a decision and letting things go the way they go and allowing an experience that our whole life has otherwise been constructed to avoid having to feel. That's the nexus of transformation right there. That's where leadership can actually grow, in that place and nowhere else. Let's dunk a little bit on leadership seminars and courses and degrees and stuff at this point. The nature of most leadership teachings is that it unconsciously supports people to do more of the strategy that ensures they avoid that experience that they don't want to have via the teachings. So like, if I've learned to be the one that synthesizes, metabolizes information and insight, I go to a leadership seminar, class, degree program, whatever. I learn about all of these degree programs. Amazing. I metabolize them. I turn them into more insight. I learn about how I need to show up, blah, 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 blah. And all of that helps me be even more competent. And at no point did I really have to be brought into a full felt experience of the lack of competency and then held there and witnessed by someone whilst I tried to escape it until I could unfold in that place. That's not to say every leadership training does that, but the vast majority of them do, because this is ubiquitous and it's hard to see. And instead, what happens is it actually ironically reinforces people's strategies. People become even better with even more sophisticated language at avoiding the thing unconsciously that their whole life has been structured around avoiding. 1112A. I have one more thing here. I don't think that is going to be our topic for today. I feel pretty complete. So here's the stuff you can practice if you're following along and wanting to put some of this into action, is really notice the machinery. And the easiest access point for the machinery is to look at what you judge, dislike, despise, put down, whatever in other people, to sit in the idea, like to just sit with the discomfort that might get caused, the friction. If like, hey, what if what if that's me? What if that's a mirror? And that's a tough one, because the compelling question is, do I do that? Like if you're looking across the aisle at that cultural, political person you don't like, and you ask the question, am I like that? Or do I do that? Like a closed-ended question, there's not a lot of juice there. More powerful is, where am I already doing that? And then really sitting in the discomfort and the desire to cross that out that creates, that's the pen. And then noticing all the things you do to avoid showing up as that. Starting to get a handle on that gives you the thing you can start to turn towards. And if you can start to turn towards that, you can start to work with it and start to unfold it. And if you can do that, your whole quality, capacity, your whole range as a leader radically opens up. Okay, my lovelies, that's everything on the show for today. I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I can't believe it's Friday already. Holy mackerel. as always, if you have suggestions for topics, please send them to me. And I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Bye, y'all.